Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Ash.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to the final part of our season ratings, where we have been looking at the teams and the drivers across the grid in 2019 and giving them a rating out of 10, and in our opinion of how they've done this season. So obviously before this we have looked at Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull together in part 1. If you haven't checked that out, go and check that out obviously. Yesterday we checked out the Formula 1.5 where we looked at McLaren, Renault, Toro Rosso and Racing Point, and today we look at Formula 1.75 as they kind of drifted off in their performances throughout the year. You could kind of classify Williams in their own category, but we're going to put Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams in that back category. So we'll go and we'll jump straight into those ratings, I think, guys. So we'll start off with Alfa Romeo, and as always we will look at the driver first who finished higher in the championship standings, and that is Kimi Raikkonen. And for me, Kimi Raikkonen scores a 7 out of 10.
6 out of 10.
Kimi Raikkonen had a very solid first half of the season, getting the most out of that Alfa Romeo car, and it really started to excel, and I think I gave him quite a high rating in our mid-season ratings, maybe an 8 or a 9 out of 10 for that. Second half of the season it started to tail off, mixes of driver mistakes from Kimi and also just mechanical failures or issues with Alfa Romeo that were out of his control, or Daniel Kvyat ramming into him at Singapore. So it really wasn't a second half of the season to remember, other than obviously that 4th place that they achieved in Brazil. I think for his first season in Alfa Romeo, coming down from the Ferrari, it was a very solid, consistent season from Kimi Raikkonen. So that's why it gets a 7 out of 10 for me.
I just feel as if the second half of the season, the car dropped off and Kimi Raikkonen's frustrations showed. Whereas in the first half of the season, if the car didn't necessarily have the pace, he still showed that fight to go forward. The frustration got the better of him in the second half of the season, and it didn't perform. He didn't perform at a level where he'd want to be consistently. So it just wasn't an all-round good performance for the second half of the season, which lowers the score slightly for me.
And moving on to his teammate, Antonio Giovinazzi, in his rookie year, as it was his first full season in F1, and he did enough to secure a second season in Formula 1. For me, Antonio Giovinazzi also gets, he was also going to get a 7, he gets a 6 out of 10 from me.
6 as well.
Giovinazzi, first half of the season really struggled to kind of get to grips and was convincingly being beaten by Kimi Raikkonen in both race and qualifying. As the season has gone on, he's improved in his performances. He's got closer to Kimi Raikkonen in qualifying, and Kimi's pace in qualifying has always been an asset of his. So that has been impressive, how he's actually showed getting closer to Kimi Raikkonen. Also getting that his best career finish of 9th in Monza in his home Grand Prix with lots of pressure was pretty impressive for Gio. But he has still struggled with some mistakes within it. But for me, he did enough to secure his seat for 2020 Alfa Romeo, but a season that he needs to kick on from.
Yeah, it's a setting up season for him. He's getting used to being in Formula 1 and just needed to have that to settle down and be able to actually kick on next season, which I'm sure we'll see, especially as Alfa, I'm assuming, are going to kick on in terms of their performance as well. Just feels as if there were a few mistakes that started to drift in, well, continued to drift in to his performances when he was having strong races. So Spa was having a really good race and then ended up spinning out. It just, yeah, every time he seemed to have a good performance, there was a mistake to go with it. So.
I did do him disjustice there. I said career best performance of 9th at Monza in his home Grand Prix. But I forgot Brazil, where he got 5th in, obviously 4th and 5th for the Alfa Romeos. And obviously a highlight for him was probably leading for the first time since the 1980s in his Alfa Romeo.
He wasn't leading in the 1980s.
well, no, he for the first time in an Alfa Romeo. An Alfa Romeo car has led a Grand Prix since the 1980s. That was Gio in Singapore.
It was also one of the it was the first since, was it 2014? That a car other than a Ferrari, Mercedes.
Yes, I believe it was
2014, wasn't it?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Ferrari,
that would have been
Mercedes,
McLaren.
Red Bull. McLaren. There we go.
Yeah. So sorry, Gio, for missing out on your theirs, but still a 6 out of 10 for me in terms of he lost that internal teammate battle as well. Alfa Romeo as a whole, 6 out of 10, I would say.
5 out of 10.
6 out of 10. There were positives, and in the first half of the season, they were challenging. Kimi Raikkonen and the team seemed to have found a happy balance. It hadn't quite worked with Gio up until that point, but they were getting strong performances out of the car. How they dropped off in the second half of the season in terms of performance, and yeah, just fading away from the likes of Toro Rosso and Racing Point in the championship, will be really disappointing for them as a team, and they certainly will be wanting to rectify that in 2020. But they have a consistent driver lineup now. It'll be interesting to see how they do push on next year.
Good first half of the season, poor second half of the season. In the middle.
5 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. See?
Fair enough. And then we move on to our second team that we'll be looking at in this video. We will be talking about Haas in a little bit more general in our second episode of F1 Worldwide that comes out on Thursday this week. We have Katie on as our guest there, so you guys look forward to that one. But Haas, Kevin Magnussen finished higher. For me, considering everything that's gone, 6 out of 10.
I'd agree, 6 out of 10 is quite a nice score to give him.
It's difficult to go higher just because of how poor that Haas car did. But still, for Kevin Magnussen, he got good performances. He got the 6th place in Australia, and I believe early season he also got a 5th in Austria as well. I know he performed well. I think it was one of the radio messages of the year of him going a bit crazy after securing that performance. He's done well considering he hasn't had the car beneath him to consistently challenge. It's a difficult season. It's difficult to give him a really high positive score, but it also feels a little bit harsh to give him anything lower as well.
He's competed well in qualifying. Unfortunately, race pace for the Haas hasn't been there all season, so has ended up dropping off in the races. But I would say over the season, he has been a stronger performer than Roman Grosjean in terms of finishing compared to where they're qualifying. So, give him a 6.
And that moves us quite nicely onto Roman Grosjean himself. And for me, he gets a 5 out of 10.
I agree on that one.
It's difficult to be too harsh on Roman this season. I know a lot of people would be. Because he's had so many mechanical issues. I think you said 2/3 of his retirements have been mechanical. Roughly around about there. So it's difficult when that happens. He has been integral in terms of helping the team get any sort of performance out of that Haas car, and he has been able to get the car into Q3 at times, which has been impressive, but it has had Saturday performance. During the race, it just quite hasn't worked out for him, and he hasn't been able to find the tyre performance that Kevin Magnussen has at times to get points finishes or a higher finish than what he managed to actually get. So yeah, it's been a difficult season for Roman, but it's difficult to judge him too harshly.
Yeah, when you're not finishing all of the races, it is difficult to actually give a full rating on that. But it's still one of those where, yes, the majority of his retirements have been mechanical, but there's also been the times where he's put his car in positions where there's the potential for a race-ending incident where it's not necessary. So I would say Singapore was a racing incident with George Russell, but he was never going to get an overtake done on the outside at that turn. So don't put your car there. Don't risk it. Especially when you're in a car that hasn't been performing. You don't want to be losing valuable opportunities to get finishes. So I just think this season, it's almost as if it's the Roman Grosjean of old. We'd seen the maturity of him, and it's now just dropped back. But I'm going to put some of that down to the uncertainty around his contract, especially when you've got a team principal coming out and saying that a rival is a strong consideration for that seat.
Job security in any walk of life, or job insecurity, never brings out the best in people, in my opinion. But we look at Haas themselves, and Haas, I think you have to be harsh here, and it's got to be a 3 out of 10.
I'd say 4.
For me, it's a 3 out of 10, because if you're in the harshest possible way, in the nicest possible way, but it's still going to come across as harsh, if you try and cheapskate the sport, then sometimes your performances are going to come across a little bit cheap. Yes, they've had people were uneasy when they got into the sponsorship with Rich Energy in the first place, and it looks that they probably didn't do enough background checking on whether they would be a reliable investor. Maybe harsh, not sure anyone could foresee what would happen with Rich Energy, but the car itself, they haven't been able to fix and solve solutions. They haven't been able to get any sort of performance out of this tyres, which has plagued them throughout the whole season. Their chassis, they had a naturally quick car, but they haven't been able to find a way to get the best out of that car. And so for me, that's why I have to judge them harshly as a team.
I would say their 1 lap pace has been really good this season, which is a positive for them. It's the race pace which is an issue. So when you're dropping off that much, you need to be qualifying on pole position to be able to get a strong finish, which is a real issue for them. They're never going to be able to challenge that highly. But that's the main thing. If they could bring together the package so that they can perform on a Sunday, they'd have had some really good finishes this season. And when you get into the end of the season and your fastest spec is still your Australia spec, you've got major issues there in terms of your development. So poor season for Haas, and you really want them to bounce back, because then that's just another team that should be competing in the midfield, really.
Yeah, and now we move on to the final team, and it's a hard one for us to watch, and for you guys probably to watch as well. With a team as great as Williams, in terms of the history of Formula 1, this has not been a great season. But we start off with the rookie of George Russell.
No, we don't. We start off with Robert Kubica.
Oh my God, we do. Because I would naturally put George Russell ahead. But we start off championship position, Robert Kubica. For me, a 5 out of 10.
I'm going to give him a 5.
I think I give him a 5 out of 10 because I don't think Robert Kubica has done anything terribly bad, and just getting back to F1 it is an incredible achievement and inspirational in itself. But he hasn't also done anything to stand out, or he hasn't done anything to really criticise. He hasn't really done anything stand out to go, wow, that was really good. Yes, he secured the points finish, but that was obviously down to penalties being given to Alfa Romeo, not necessarily him, and that was just how it happened. Was the one of the 2 races he finished ahead of George Russell?
Yeah, France was the other one.
Yeah, and so
in that one, Russell had to make a pit stop because of an issue with he got a puncture from debris, I think, wasn't it?
Exactly. So for me, Robert Kubica, I can't go really any harsher, but I can't go better. It's a 5 out of 10.
I'm giving him a 5 out of 10, mainly for the reasons that we discussed in our video with Raz. He has done so much for the visibility of people with disabilities in sport. And I think the main takeaway from this season is, no matter what your condition is in terms of basically anything really, no matter what you look at, how you look at someone, if they have the ability to perform a role, they should be allowed to do it. And Kubica has the ability, the issue is the car doesn't. So it was great to see him in F1 for the things that he's done in terms of the outside influence that he will have, and it's the fact that he's paving the way for people like Billy Munger to actually have those opportunities in single-seater racing. So I'm giving him the 5 because the season itself was awful, but for what he has done outside of the sport and in it, he deserves a lot of recognition for that.
Yeah, very well said, Ash. And now we move on to George Russell.
Yes.
And for me, it is an 8 out of 10.
I'm giving him a 7.
George Russell, for me, gets an 8 out of 10 because he has convincingly beaten his teammate. He has done what it is very difficult to do, even if you feel you are comfortably better than your teammate, which is he beat him 21-0 in qualifying, which just shows the standard of George Russell not to make a single mistake in qualifying throughout the whole season, consistently be and on the verge of a Q2, which would have been astonishing in Hungary, wasn't it, before the summer break.
Gone out 10 seconds.
He
10
probably
seconds
would.
later, that's all he
Track
needed.
Evolution probably would have done it for him. But it's so hard to kind of justify it within such a terrible car. But I think he's been brilliant, and I think he would have got a points finish this year, and it would have been heralded as a very good points finish if the team had listened to him like they listened to Lance Stroll in Racing Point and made the decision to go on to slicks when Lance Stroll did, and they turned him down on that decision, and that cost him his best chance of a points finish this year. But he's just been relentlessly consistent throughout. He's got the best out of that Williams car. I'm really excited to see him in a car that can perform, because Abu Dhabi testing happened last week and he topped the timings in the Mercedes. George Russell is a talent, and I think considering everything he's come up against, hugely impressive rookie season.
If I took names out of the equation and took out teams of the equation, and I said to you, I'm talking about a driver that has beat their teammate 21-0 in qualifying and 19-2 in terms of races, you're going to be looking at me saying, oh wow, this is a world champion. That's the sort of level George Russell was performing at. The issue he's got, he was in a car that my Ford Fiesta probably would have been quicker than. And my Ford Fiesta is awful. Like, that's the sort of level that Williams was driving at in terms of the car around it. Joking aside, my car would be nowhere near a Formula 1 car, but you know what I mean. It's the level of performance that car had in relation to the ones they were against. There's never going to be a chance. It would be like me turning up to a track day and trying to race a Porsche with my car. I would never get close to them. I wouldn't have a chance. So yes, he didn't get a point this season, which is unfortunate, and I really wanted him to because I felt his performances deserved that. But outfinished his teammate, as I said, 19 times. Never finished lower than where he started. Admittedly, it would have been difficult for him to have done that, but was picking up places consistently based on poorer performances. So outfinished Haas's, he's outfinished Alfas this season. He outfinished Toro Rosso's. Cars that should be beating him, when he did manage to get ahead of them, be it because of issues, they weren't able to get past him easily, whereas when they came up against Kubica, they were. So it shows the level that he has been able to drive at. Unfortunately, he hasn't had the machinery around him to be able to compete nearer the points, which hopefully next season he'll get, because at the moment, I'll put this one out there, he's 3 places away from being in the top 10 in terms of longest start to a career in Formula 1 without scoring a point, and he's actually only 20 races away from being number 1.
Oh God.
So if Williams have an awful season next year, George Russell could have the record there.
Oh, that's a depressing thought for George.
Yeah, so hopefully he'll start the season really well and get a point in Australia, and then we can forget about this.
Fingers crossed. But now we move and we look on to Williams themselves, and for me, I can't give them anything more than a 1 out of 10. and that's generous.
I'm going to give them a 4.
1 out of 10 for me, because they turned up to testing late. The car has been so far off and they went so far wrong in the development. They haven't even got close to the competitors and the points in normal circumstances. George Russell has maximised that performance, but it generally has come when other cars have had issues on the grid. They've been the back markers comfortably for the end, and they haven't really shown any real improvement throughout the year. There was a small stage, I'd say 2 or 3 races, maybe from Silverstone, Hockenheim and Hungary, where they did show a small step of improvement, that they were getting closer on the deltas. But from the second half of the season, and for a team as great as what Williams are within F1, it's been an embarrassing season.
It was a poor start to the season. Turning up to testing with a car that was illegal was definitely a poor start. But there've been glimmers, and that's the thing. In terms of strategy, they've tried things which, when you're that far off the pace, you need to, because I think they're going to have put themselves in a good position going into 2020 in terms of strategy options, because they've been able to try random things at tracks already. So when it comes to, we need a different strategy that's trying to gain us places, they're going to have that knowledge. They just haven't been able to bring the progress in terms of the development side of things, and that's been the real issue this season. But as I say, hopefully they'll be nearer the points, trying to get some. Right, please, I don't want George Russell to get the record. I like him. It's just not a great place to be in. But they've had those times where, yes, they've taken advantage of things around them, i.e. Kubica's point. You've got to take advantage of what you can, and they have done that. It just hasn't been where they should be.
And guys, that wraps it up. Our season ratings. 2019 season.
Rating?
Oh, let's give the season a rating.
Season as a whole.
I think so. For me, the season gets a 7 out of 10. I'm
going to give it an 8.
I think, for me, why I gave it a 7, it's had some fantastic races within it. And obviously, probably since, we missed out by one in Austria, since we started doing this channel back in Silverstone, which, it's been a bit of a roller coaster kind of since then, in terms of, obsessing over F1 as much as we have done. But not having a title fight in either the constructors or drivers going down to the last race and being wrapped up. The midfield battle has been fantastic, but at stages, some of the stewarding and stuff around it's been a good season, but it's certainly had a lot of things that needed to improve and progress forward.
I'd say the racing's been brilliant. The fact that we've had 3 teams really competing at the front, not every single race, but across the season we've had that. The midfield battle, definitely between the McLaren and the Renault, and even the Racing Point getting involved in that to some extent, with the Toro Rosso showing up in some of the races, it's just been one where there have been battles throughout, which has made it really interesting. And we have finally got to see the battle we wanted, in the fact that we have seen Hamilton and Verstappen actually racing each other on track in cars that have been quite close in terms of performance. It's brilliant, and I am looking forward to 2020 when we can see that some more.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that too. So there you go, guys. That is our season ratings. That ends on a much more positive note than the obviously somber one of Williams. But guys, hope you've enjoyed this kind of series of season ratings. Let us know, as you've done in the other videos, what you think of our ratings. Do you agree with them? Disagree? We'd love to hear your ratings in the comments below. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. And what else can you do, Ash?
You can make sure to subscribe so that our videos go into your YouTube inbox, and if you press the bell icon, you'll get a notification when one of our videos goes live, and you'll be able to see what we're doing over the winter break.
And next up for you guys will be the continuation of our kind of season review section, and we will be doing like we do usually post race after the kind of dust has settled, a full season review of the 2019 season, and that will be coming out to you guys tomorrow. So hopefully you look forward to that one. But for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.